After the attack, and whether the killer had a contact with ISIS or whether it was merely a online inspiration. The president mentioned some videos. I'm here with Omar Villafranca as we await this press conference. This is at State Police Headquarters in Baton Rouge, not all that far from where we are. They got a big compound there. What are the big questions that you hope will be answered today?
Well, we want to find out, of course, as you mentioned, is there anyone else that the police should be looking for and that the public has to worry about at this point? The motivation. There's a lot of speculation. Usually what's good about these press conferences is that all of the crazy things that are floating around on social media get immediately squashed with official language. And that is good because now we can get down to the investigation. But also, we covered these so much, unfortunately. We want to hear also later on about the victims, who these people were, and when the city of New Orleans is going to get back to the business of the city of New Orleans. Listen, right behind us, just behind the cameras, there are thousands of people here who not only came here for New Year's Eve, but they came here for a festivity, a college football game. They want to know, are they going to be safe? Is there some sense of normalcy? Hopefully we'll hear that from the authorities.
We've been saying 15 dead. You mentioned the victims. We now know that includes the killer himself, the driver of the truck. So it's 14 dead locally.
14 dead. And we were at UMC Hospital earlier this morning. They still have 15 victims there that are being treated at this moment. They have others in their system, but that one in New Orleans, they're being treated there. And we talked to the doctor, and he told us they saw all types of injuries. Now, right behind us, Tony, this is where it started. Right behind us where everything went in. So he was telling us about those injuries, gruesome, something that he said it's the biggest mass casualty event they've ever had at that hospital.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we also know from conversations with Ann Kirkpatrick, who's the chief of police here, that there was a bollard system to prevent vehicle attacks on Bourbon Street. That system was removed for repair and improvement. It was going to be replaced by a better system, but there was this gap period. One of the questions I hope they address here at the press conference is how the driver of the truck knew that there was this soft spot, or was it merely an attack of opportunity? Was he driving by looking for an opening?
That's an interesting question. That video, which had happened behind us, you see him pass the police car, go around on the sidewalk and go in. Maybe he saw something. Hopefully we'll hear something about it during the investigation, that's what he saw. But if you've ever spent any time in the French Quarter, you see those bollards. And I describe it to people, there's these things that are in the road. If you've ever been around the White House and the Capitol, too, they lift up off the ground like that. So a car, it's like a mini wall. People are used to walking around these when it's pedestrian traffic, because that's what the French Quarter is all about. You grab your drink, listen to music, and you walk around. But when were these upgrades supposed to be finished? We understand it's supposed to be finished by the Super Bowl, because that doesn't happen all the time.
The projects have a way of being delayed, particularly when it involves manufacturing. Nicole Skanga is following all this from Washington for us. Nicole, I'm fascinated by an answer I got earlier this morning from Ann Kirkpatrick, the chief of police here in New Orleans. I asked her about accomplices, and she said, well, it's not that we think there are, it's that we can't rule out that there are not. What do you make of that language?
Well, Tony, we actually have brand new information. A U.S. official familiar with the investigation telling our colleague Andy Trier that the FBI now believes there are no accomplices in the attack in New Orleans. And I'll wrap here. I believe officials are coming to the stage.
Yeah, Nicole, thank you. That is great new information, and we're hoping to get a lot more of it right now. I believe that's the governor of Louisiana there, Jeff Landry, addressing the audience. Let's listen in.
Reminding the citizens of Louisiana that as you travel around the state, you will see the flags of all state buildings at half-mast in honor of those lives that were lost in this horrific act of violence. I also think that it's important to remember that what happened yesterday was akin to those who are old enough to remember jigsaw puzzles. And that you would take a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you empty the box, and you've got to start sifting through those pieces. And you want to start, if you're real good, you start at the corners, right? Try to put your corners together. And from yesterday to today, over 1,000 law enforcement agents and officers, men and women, have been poring over countless amounts of data, of videos, of surveillances, interviews, tracking down every possible lead that came to us, whether it was the New Orleans Police Department, the Louisiana State Police, the FBI, or our other federal agencies. Also yesterday, I issued an emergency declaration. That declaration was meant to streamline resources and communications between state, local, and federal partners. And we're seeing the results of it. I also would like to remind everyone that what's going on in this city and this state is twofold. We've got an active criminal investigation going on, while we're also continuing to secure the city in preparation for 3 o'clock kickoff time for the Sugar Bowl. With that, I would also remind those who are in the city that as far as state resources are concerned, we have the Louisiana State Police, the Louisiana National Guard, which was part of that emergency declaration, which allowed us to put an entire MP company on the ground. Those become force multipliers, is what we call that in law enforcement and the military. That helps to add to the resources that we have. Wildlife and Fisheries, the Department of Corrections, DSF, DHS, our Veterans Affairs, our Probation and Parole, all state agencies. Any state agency who has a post-certified officers are here in the city to help secure the city. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Christopher Rea, who is the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counter and Terrorism Division. Chris?
Thank you, Governor Landry. Good morning. I am FBI Deputy Assistant Director Christopher Rea. I'm from our Counterterrorism Division at headquarters. I'm also joined by Assistant Special Agent in Charge Alethea Duncan from our New Orleans office, who you heard from yesterday. I'm here to discuss not only the latest investigative information we have here in New Orleans, but I'll also let you know about other investigative activities outside of the state. I first, and most importantly, want to send our deepest condolences to the victims of this horrific attack and their loved ones. 14 innocent victims were killed in this senseless attack, and at least 35 are injured. We cannot ease the grief people in this community and across the nation are feeling at this time, but rest assured, we stand with you and in support of you. All the resources, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later, all the resources of the FBI are being focused on tracking down every piece of evidence, every lead, every interview, every potential lead we've got. While I won't be able to answer all your questions today, my goal is to be as forthcoming as possible with you on what we've uncovered so far. First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act. This was obviously a critical incident, and with that, lots of information and tips come pouring in from law enforcement, first responders, and the public. We have been aggressively running down these tips and information. As you all know, that takes time, and we will continue to do so until every lead has been followed through on. This investigation is only a little more than 24 hours old. So I ask you to keep in mind that as I go through some of the specifics later. But at this point, currently, and this is another fact I want to be clear on, we do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack except for Shamsud-Din Jabbar, the subject you've already been briefed on. A little bit about what the FBI is doing. So we are surging people and assets to the area from across the region and across the nation. Special agents in multiple field offices across the country have been deployed and are assisting with potential aspects of this investigation and following up on every lead. Additional teams of special agents, professional staff, and victim specialists continue to arrive to provide more investigative power and assistance to the victims and their families. We've also forward deployed a number of our critical incident response group assets, including members of our hostage rescue team, special agent bomb technicians, and crisis management coordinators. In addition, we have deployed more evidence response technicians to continue to process the various scenes that we have. So far, we have received just over 400 tips from the public, and that information is being followed up on both here in New Orleans and across the country. Some of the tips are here in New Orleans, and there are other tips in other states across the country that we are following up on. The FBI team and our law enforcement partners here are also reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance and other video from both the French Quarter and other locations. As for a timeline, at this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament. FBI and ATF. FBI, we have a couple different scenes at the location. We have released the scene at Bourbon Street. That scene has been released. We also have a scene off of Mandeville address where we're currently searching that scene right now. FBI and ATF agents have secured that house, and that location is being searched for potential evidence. On New Year's morning, Jabbar opened fire after ramming through a blocked-off area of Bourbon Street, used his truck as a weapon to run over the victims. Teams of specially trained victim specialists, again, as I said, are on the ground here in New Orleans, assisting survivors of the attack and loved ones of the deceased. We do not believe the public is in any danger around any of these locations. 3 phones linked to Jabbar have been recovered, and digital media exploitation is a priority to see what is on the devices and determine if there are any other potential leads. Additionally, we have recovered 2 laptops and are currently reviewing them for any potential leads. Those laptops were recovered at the Mandeville address. Evidence technicians will also be going over the F-150 truck Jabbar was driving. As you know, we recovered an ISIS flag from the back of the vehicle. Jabbar declared his support for the terrorist group on social media, as I stated before, as he made his way to New Orleans. FBI bomb technicians also recovered 2 IEDs in coolers, one from the cross-section of Bourbon and Orleans Street, and the second at an intersection approximately 2 blocks away. There were multiple reports of other devices. Those reports turned out to be misinformation or not actual functioning devices. Those are the only 2 devices that we've been able to recover that were functional. Both devices were rendered safe on scene. We did obtain surveillance footage showing Jabbar placing the devices where they were found. 2 other, as I said before, 2 other items of interest were determined not to be IEDs. A little bit about Jabbar. Jabbar himself was born in the United States and is a U.S. military veteran. We are looking in everything in his life, While we have interviewed many people who know Jabbar, we still need to talk to others. Whether you know Jabbar personally, worked with him, served in the military, or saw him in New Orleans or Texas, we need to talk to you. You may not think you have relevant information, but what you know could tie in to one of our investigative leads. Specifically, we want to talk to anyone who was in the French Quarter on New Year's Eve or early on New Year's Day. That includes people spotted near one of the two IEDs on Bourbon Street. The IED was inside a cooler, and many people stopped and looked at the cooler and then continued on their way. Let's be clear, again, we do not believe at this point these people are involved in this incident in any way. We want to speak to them as witnesses and want to know what they saw and when. I went down to the crime scene last night. It is very hard to put into words what it looked like and how difficult it was to see. Anyone with information can call us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or send digital tips to fbi.gov/Bourbon Street attack. Early this morning, evidence response teams finished their work at the crime scene. Bourbon Street has been turned over to the city of New Orleans. As you know, there's also an FBI investigation in Las Vegas. We are following up on all potential leads and not ruling everything out. However, at this point, there is no definitive link between the attack here in New Orleans and the one in Las Vegas. And again, I'll preface everything with what I started with in the beginning, which was this is very early in an investigation like this. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this tragedy and everyone impacted across the country. They remain at the heart of our investigation. I also, although I've only been on the ground here a short time, I also want to express a sincere appreciation for our partners here, which include the U.S. Attorney's Office, HSI, ATF, the New Orleans PD, the Louisiana State Police, the Governor's Office, and countless others. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Special Agent in charge of ATF here, Josh Jackson.
Hey, good afternoon. As stated, my name is Joshua Jackson. I am the Special Agent in charge for the ATF New Orleans Field Division. And ATF's primary mission is preventing, reducing, and solving violent crime throughout the United States and abroad. Solving part is the focus of this investigation. ATF resources that have been brought to bear to the city and to focus with our federal, state, and local partners have been our national response team. We spoke about the scene that's still being processed now. The National Response Team of ATF is a team of certified fire investigators, certified explosive specialists, fire engineers, electrical engineers. These folks will give us additional investigative leads to help the investigative team identify what happened at the location in Mandeville and identify how that fire started and move the investigation forward from there. Additional resources that ATF has brought to bear into the city. There's our ATF Special Response Team. This is a tactical team capable of handling any sort of enforcement operation. This team is deployed, on set, and ready for the Sugar Bowl today. This team is also made available to the Louisiana State Police and also New Orleans Police Department to assist with any efforts that they may have during this period. Additional resources, as the governor alluded to, he executed executive powers and had an emergency declared to where ATF was able to tap in to Emergency Support Function 13 resources. This allowed us to bring additional explosive detection canines so that we can safely sweep the city and safely sweep the Super Bowl in preparation for the game today. These resources will still be in the city as we lead up to the Super Bowl and through Mardi Gras. These type of ATF resources will be here. The last resources ATF has brought to bear, and probably the most important one, is our victim witness coordinators. These folks come in and they provide resources to the victims and the family members that have suffered greatly during this tragedy. The entire city hurts, but the victims and the family members are in need of resources and care long after this investigation wraps up. This time next year, to be hard for the families and friends who suffered during this event. So our victim witness coordinators are working with the FBI, the City of New Orleans coordinators to provide resources to these folks out here. And as we move forward, ATF will be committed. We will work with the investigative team moving this investigation forward, but also we'll be here to make sure the city is safe and prepared as we move into the Super Bowl. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our mayor of this great city, New Orleans. Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, good morning once again. And I just want to just echo my thank yous to the unified command of our law enforcement partners and at every single level, federal, state, and governor. Governor, thank you for your partnership. Thank you. I also want to thank the residents and the visitors of the city of New Orleans for your patience, for your support, and most of all, your prayers. Our hearts and prayers continue to go out to the victims' families, and the city of New Orleans, we're resilient. And as I stated on yesterday, my focus in terms of a priority has been on our victims. As you heard, that yes, the FBI was able to clear Bourbon Street. And what that meant also for me in this city was that we were able to remove our victims, identify them, and notify their families. Real reverence. They mattered, the families matter, and matter to the city of New Orleans. In addition to that, I want to just thank again our federal partners in Washington, listening to my plea personally for the additional resources to allow for the scene to be cleared, and again, attending to our victims. I walked by each one, and I did the sign of cross in my own way, because reverence, again, is important. So while we have been able to have Bourbon Street returned back to the city of New Orleans, and the due diligence has been done, that then allowed me to give the go-ahead to begin the cleaning of Bourbon Street. That started happening in the morning about 2 a.m. It was completed before 8 a.m. this morning. But that has really set the tone, I would say, and with the confidence that I have in the law enforcement partners, all of the resources that have been activated, how we have made sure that safety continues to be our top priority, how our assets have been deployed strategically, again, for the safety and the protection of our visitors and our residents in the city. And because of that, the confidence is there to reopen Bourbon Street to the public prior to game time today. The first order will be to allow for vendors to come in and service the businesses. That's important in order for us to stand up activation, as you know, Governor. And so with that, I want to reassure the public that the city of New Orleans is not only ready for game day today, but we're ready to continue to host large-scale events in our city because we are built to host at every single turn. I want to, again, thank all of those who responded to the FBI's call for information and tips. As you heard, that has been useful. Continue to do that. The investigation is still active and absolutely under the FBI's leadership. We will continue to operate and cooperate as we always have. So I want to also thank all of our partners for the added resources for victim and crisis management. We know that that's, again, important. Working with our partner, the Greater New Orleans Foundation, we have set up a fund for our victims' families for not only today but into the future. As you heard, this is going to be a long process for our people. So with that, the city of New Orleans, and with all of my confidence, we are ready. And we could not get here again without the unified presence, support, and cooperation. We are stronger together. And I want to say again, thank you so much. Thank you, Governor. So once again, the governor would like me to reiterate that Bourbon Street will be prepared for full activation before game time today. We know 3 p.m., so we're working towards 2:30 p.m. But prior to game time, the kickoff, Bourbon Street will be restored. So we're hard at work now. Our teams are now, and of course, working with our business community to serve our public and serve our residents and our visitors alike.
In closing, I want to rest people assured that right now in the city of New Orleans, there is an unprecedented amount of law enforcement resources that are being utilized to close out and to hunt down and to finalize this investigation. I want to thank the FBI and all of our federal partners for the amount of resources they have poured into the city. This type of event can happen in any city. And that's the tragedy of it. And I think it's important for people to understand that to protect our citizens in America from evil, you have to crush it. You can't go out there and placate it. You can't go out there and say, oh, I'm going to put this in place and that in place and hope that evil doesn't show up on your doorstep, because it will. You have to crush it. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to put it all behind us. We're going to continue to keep the victims, those that are in the hospital, either fighting for their lives or trying to recover, in our thoughts and in our prayers. But you know, this morning, and I don't want to single out just one news source, but I just happened to turn on Fox and Friends, and there was a young man who was interviewed, who was actually on Bourbon Street during this horrific act of terrorism. And they closed out by asking him, what now? And I think he summed it up. He said, look, we can't live in fear, because fear will paralyze us. He said, we come down to the city to enjoy ourselves and to entertain ourselves and to be with our friends and with our families, because that's who we are. Louisiana invented hospitality. The people of this city care for each other. And believe you me, we care about each one of the lives that were lost in the city of that. We will never forget them. But it would be a tragedy if we let their losses be snuffed out because of fear. This city will be back. We will be open to family and friends and loved ones who want some time to relax from the pressures of life. And so today, we're going to have us a sugar bowl. We're going to enjoy ourselves. We're going to keep those, who have lost loved ones in mind. And we're going to get on to the business of this city and this great country. With that, I'll take any questions.
Governor, this is for you and the Assistant Director. The message has really changed since yesterday. Yesterday, the FBI said that people should be vigilant, that he did not act alone, that he likely had help, and now you're coming out the very next day and saying he was a lone wolf, everything is safe, the game moves on, everybody had a good time. How can you be so sure just 12 hours later?
Well, we're going to bring him up. All right, but here's what I want to remind everyone. Like I was a deputy sheriff. Right, I worked in a jail. I worked on the street. I worked on the interstate. I served warrants. I can tell you. Look, in today's world, I get it. Information, we get information like that. Everybody lives in a 15-second TikTok video. We think that life operates like it does on our phones, and it just doesn't. Information changes. In fact, that's why we ask the media for patience. we get information. Like I said, no one dumps a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and puts it together in 5 seconds. Okay? And what I would tell you is that I appreciate the fact that what we did was we're under-promising and over-delivering today. And I think that's important. And I want to remind something. Look, because over the last decade, law enforcement has taken it on the chin, unfairly. And there are great men and women serving in the FBI, in ATF, in Louisiana State Police, in New Orleans PD. Our sheriffs have been unbelievable in this. And I tell you, they want to protect you all. And we have to trust them. And sometimes the information we put out, we end up finding out that it may be incorrect. But guess what? What we're doing here is something that I think is important. It's called transparency. And look, something may change again. Here's what I do know, though. Right now, this is one of the safest places on earth. That doesn't mean that nothing can't happen.
Thank you, Governor. And to echo exactly, I think the Governor put it eloquently, as could be said. In a lot of these instances, I also had the opportunity to deploy to Boss Bomb, and I will tell you this is almost carbon copy to Boss Bomb as far as the inaccurate reporting that comes up. And what the Governor said is we want to be transparent with the public. Years of the FBI not being transparent, we're being as transparent as we possibly can. And unfortunately, as we're being transparent, unfortunately for that, there is some information that we have to go back and recorrect. And in this particular incident, you heard the resources that we've brought, that the other state and locals have brought. We've had 24 hours now to go through media, to go through phones, to interview people, to analyze those videos, analyze other databases. And after all of that, there's been hundreds and hundreds of leads done just in 24 hours. We're confident at this point that there is no accomplices. And I'll give you an idea of how that information sometimes, a lot of the early reports came out that there were extra people that were setting the coolers down, right? It turns out those were just patrons on the street that were looking inside the coolers, right? We didn't know that at first, so we had to kind of track all that down and put that to rest. So that's just an example, one of the pieces of information, but there were other pieces of information that after we got our feet under us a little bit and on the ground here, we were able to put together a much more accurate picture of the subject and his attention.
Just one follow-up. The updated death toll, we just wanted to double check that.
Yes.
So 14, not 15. Sorry, sir.
14, and then the shooter himself would be 15 total, to include the shooter.
And
Was the terrorist wearing the suicide vest?
the IEDs, were the IEDs pipe bombs, and have you discovered a remote detonator anywhere? And when you said that you have surveillance footage of the suspect planting those IEDs, what time roughly were they planted?
Yeah, those roughly a couple hours. I don't have the exact times in front of me. A couple hours prior to the attack.
Before midnight,
attack.
Probably
after midnight. I want to say 1 or 2 in the morning,
so
but I
he
can't.
left the area and came back.
Correct. That's our assumption now. I mean, we still have a lot to work through. We're getting more surveillance video and everything else, but that's the assumption.
Was he wearing a suicide vest?
Were there sweeps being done on Bourbon Street? Would there have been canines out on New Year's Eve? Would there have been bomb sweeps done?
Look, I
as part of
think-
the regular precautions?
Let me just say this, and either Joe or Rob will correct me. Look, a bomb dog doesn't operate like a drug dog, right? On Bourbon Street, there's a lot of senses, right? A lot of smells. I don't think you can run a bomb dog down Bourbon Street with thousands of people there and be able to sniff out a bomb. What we've been doing, what they have been doing, it's certainly a complete sweep of the quarter because of the limited amount of traffic that's been out there. Let me just say this. I think this may help. It would be my hope that as some additional time goes through, maybe closer to maybe the beginning of next week, we will, if we've got it to what extent buttoned up as we could, I would work with the FBI and the city, and maybe we can come up with a timeline to be able to get you those informations, kind of walk everyone through from day one through. I think it's extremely premature, and you're really putting us on some speculative grounds to ask some of those questions, because again, it's only been 24 hours. I mean, can you imagine how far we've come in 24 hours? So,
Just clarify if there was pipe bombs and a remote detonator.
Was he wearing the
Well,
we'll go one at a
What
time.
is being done to make Bourbon Street safer tonight than it was New Year's Eve? Are temporary bollards being brought in to block off the street, and why weren't those used on New Year's Eve?
Well, look, here's what I'm going to say. Every time some bad guy does something like this, there's what we call an after-action review. Because again, nothing is 100%. We have reinforced the area. We have deployed some additional types of assets. I personally, it's up to the city or other. I don't like to give specifics because I don't like to tell the enemy what we got. But I can tell you we're in better shape than we were before.
We have time for two more questions.
Can you speak to the Mandeville scene? And some neighbors at that site told us they smelled smoke early in the morning. Was there a fire there? Any kind of burning happening?
Yeah,
Do you still believe that fire happened after the suspect was killed?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll move to 18. I do want to address the suicide vest question. I want to kill that one right away. Okay. There was no evidence that the subject was wearing a suicide vest at all. So I will turn the Mandeville stuff over to ATF.
Yeah, as to the fire at the Mandeville scene, so our working theory now is that the fire started after Jabbar was already deceased. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. You could have different time devices. You could have a long cord that extended that time. You could also have pressure cookers that were put on top of the stove filled with gasoline, and then it went off. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but that is why our ATF National Response Team is here to answer those questions and get that investigative lead back to our team. So more to come on that. We're still processing that scene. We're out there right now.
Are you able to understand how he became radicalized over all of this time? What brought him to Bourbon Street? Do we understand, was there any international travel involved? What led him down this path to this sort of radicalization?
Sure, a lot of questions we're still asking ourselves. We know that he specifically picked out Bourbon Street. Not quite sure why. I mean, I think one can assume that it was lots of people New Year's Eve, with a target for an attack. That's the stuff in the coming days as far as that path to radicalization that we're really going to be digging into and making a priority of. So what I can tell you right now is that he was 100% inspired by ISIS, and so we're digging through more of the social media, more interviews, working with some of our other partners to ascertain just how to ascertain a little bit more about that connection.
We're gonna do one more. Kate?
Right there. You've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's actually for Special Agent Ryan. Sir,
I prefer those. I'm gonna check.
In order to reassure people, would you be able to explain the analysis and evidence that has led to this most recent understanding that he was a lone actor and that there is at this point, at least from your understanding, no further danger to the public?
Sure. I think a lot of that, multiple interviews, the hundreds of interviews that we've conducted so far, the social media review that we've done of his accounts, by my count now, the 5 devices we have, the 3 cell phones and the 2 laptops, been able to initially triage or go through that, and there is just nothing to indicate through call records, through anything on those devices, through interviews, through anything in our systems that he was aided in this attack by anybody. And again, I have to caveat, like the governor said, this is 24 hours into it. And that could change, but right now we've got a much better picture and much more confidence on what we were dealing with than we were just 24 hours ago.
All right, look, thank y'all so very much. Again, we're going to try to get y'all as much information as possible. So any additional information will be put out through press releases. Thank you so very much.
Moving forward, are we going to be making Bourbon Street a pedestrian only, or are we going to be allowing cars?
Bring me in.
You've been listening to state and local officials in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, not far from where I am in New Orleans, talk about yesterday's deadly truck attack on Bourbon Street. And we got a whole heck of a lot of new information, including the somewhat astounding fact that the FBI is done on Bourbon Street, has handed the street back to the city of New Orleans, and that they intend to have it open for business and tourists and celebrations by game time today of the Sugar Bowl. That is 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. Omar Villafranca is with me to go through all the rest that we heard. We got a lot of new information, including, I think, a headline off the top, which is no known accomplices. In other words, a lone wolf.
No, they were saying that they believe he was a lone wolf. But it was also interesting to see, remember, we were hearing about IEDs being placed, and that's why they were saying there may be other accomplices. Assistant FBI director came out and said it was him who was placing those IEDs several hours before he drove down this street behind us. Him placing those IEDs.
So we got a timeline as well, and I should say I mentioned Baton Rouge. The presser was in New Orleans, not far from where I'm standing. The timeline is interesting. The truck was rented on the 30th of December. He drives here on the 31st.
Yep.
In the early morning hours before the attack on the 1st, he posts 5 videos to social media. Notable for several reasons. One, he clearly says 100%, I'm part of ISIS now. The FBI says this is 100% inspired by ISIS. And initially, he was going to harm his family and friends, but then, as the FBI details it, he was concerned that that wouldn't focus the attention on what he wanted. What he wanted was this to be about believers and disbelievers and a battle between the two. And
the FBI also said he joined ISIS, they think, before this summer. And that's giving time for possible planning, which is what we're hoping to hear more from. And I'm sure that will come out. They have multiple cell phones and laptops. I'm sure they're going through that, and maybe we'll find out more about that. But you mentioned the videos. They said one of the last videos was at 3:02 a.m. and around 3:15 is when they believe he drove down Bourbon Street right behind us. So after posting one of those videos, then the attack happened.
So this very quickly becomes a conversation about radicalization, because this is a 10-year Army vet, born in the U.S., father to at least 2 children here in the U.S., was in the reserves, went to college, in many respects would seem to be doing okay, and yet somehow finds his way to this.
And born and grew up in Beaumont, Texas. I lived in Beaumont, Texas, Jefferson County, not far from the Louisiana border. It's an oil and gas type town. So it's odd somebody coming from there, but it can happen anywhere in America.
Which is why, and this is important for our viewers, the FBI is saying if you knew this guy even in a tangential way, or you were even present on New Year's Eve on Bourbon Street, they want to hear from you because they're not sure what information could connect to their investigation.
And I find that interesting because you're right. There's multiple investigations, I'm sure some that we don't fully know about, and they're going down trails. They said over 400 tips came in from all over the country, not just here in New Orleans. So they, of course, want to get more information from people, track it down, see if any dots connect. They don't want people connecting the dots online.
Yeah, they got 3 phones and 2 laptops, so they've got a lot more to go into. Yeah. But amazingly, just over 24 hours from the attack itself, Bourbon Street will be reopened. And we've seen some activity, actually, behind us, the mouth of Bourbon Street there. They're putting in some anti-vehicle ramming devices, these about waist-high yellow iron obstacles that would prevent a vehicle from going down. But let's bring in Scott McFarland, who's on the north lawn of the White House. Scott, it seemed like President Biden yesterday had some information that we now got a bigger picture of from the FBI itself, and those briefings will continue. What can you tell us?
Yeah, momentarily, President Biden returns here to the White House from Camp David. Then in about 20 minutes, he is scheduled for an in-situation room briefing, a private briefing with his Homeland Security officials about whatever threats remain from New Orleans or from Las Vegas. You'll recall the president drew some connective tissue last night between the Las Vegas investigation and the New Orleans investigation, which the FBI just severed now. We also know there's a briefing this morning for members of Congress from the FBI and Homeland Security officials about what threats remain. There is grave concerns from the Louisiana delegation about whether this was going to metastasize into other public safety threats. And there has been, pretty openly, Tony, some cynicism, including from the Louisiana congressional delegation, about the FBI's transparency and their concerns the FBI won't be transparent in this investigation. We also saw former President Trump posting on social media his cynicism about the FBI, but you heard just now from the FBI about the latest in its investigation. And I'll add this, Tony. There is, as just behind me, construction of the inaugural platforms for January 20th and concern about the security then.
Yeah, all eyes will be on Washington, D.C. then, but for now we're here in New Orleans. I want to go to Nicole Skanga, though, who's in Washington following the investigation here. Nicole, you had the reporting as we led into the presser that there were no known accomplices. That now appears to be accurate, confirmed by the FBI. I tell you what, though, chills when they said 2 confirmed IEDs and they described them as functional. That's a very bad sign indeed. What else did you hear?
Yeah, Tony, night and day in terms of this press conference. Why did the FBI come out today and say actually no known accomplices? Well, they took 5 devices from locations that they searched and the scene, 2 laptops, 3 phones. They have scoured those call records and those messages. They say they are confident that there were no accomplices here. In addition to that, they found 2 viable IEDs. You mentioned it there, improvised explosive devices, one on the intersection of Bourbon and Orleans Street in a cooler, another one 2 blocks away. They had found 2 other devices that they looked into and then determined were not improvised explosives. Part of the reason the FBI said that they were probing whether or not there were accomplices here is that passerbys, after those improvised explosive devices were placed, they were in coolers, and passerbys were checking them out. They were picking them up. They were looking at them. The FBI there saying that they were placed on New Year's Day around 1 or 2 a.m. And looking over surveillance video, FBI first believed that some of those bystanders, those passerbys, might have been involved. Now they say they've seen the video of the suspect placing those IEDs, and they're confident that he acted alone.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much. To recap for our viewers, the FBI says it believes the truck attacker acted alone and that there is no longer any danger to the public in the New Orleans area. It also said the attacker posted several videos online proclaiming in clear language his support for ISIS, said he had joined ISIS. Also, no definitive connection at this point, nothing definitive, key word there, between the attack here and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas. Our live coverage of the investigation is going to continue on CBS News 24/7 and also on the CBS Evening News. We'll have complete coverage tonight. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New Orleans.
And you have been watching a CBS News special report live from New Orleans, Louisiana, following up on a press conference from not only law enforcement officials, but also local and state officials talking about the latest updates on this terror attack that happened early New Year's morning on Bourbon Street. So I just want to repeat a few of the headlines to come out of this press conference. Number one, the FBI believes there is no accomplice, no other threat to the public as of right now. 2 IEDs were found near Bourbon Street. They say were placed there by the attacker just a couple of hours before the actual attack with that pickup truck. Also, Bourbon Street will reopen at about 2:30 this afternoon, their time, ahead of the Sugar Bowl game later on this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And also a big headline here. They say, as of right now, there is no link between this terrorist attack in New Orleans and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas. But right away, I want to bring in Anna Schechter, who is the senior coordinating producer for the CBS News Crime and Safety Unit. She joins us now. Anna, authorities talked about trying to find possible accomplices. After we just mentioned this latest update, the focus of this investigation has shifted back to the suspect. What is the FBI saying about the suspect today? What did you take out of this press conference?
We learned a lot of new details, Liz, that were really interesting, particularly in the hours leading up to the attack. What I found interesting that we didn't note during the special report is that the videos were seemingly addressed to his family and friends, and that he initially was planning to carry out the attack and hurt his relatives and friends, but he wanted the attention to be on his extremist message. He wanted the focus to be on, quote, the war between the believers and non-believers, end quote. That is directly from that assistant director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, who was just speaking there at the podium. So that really jumped out at me, that he posted 5 videos to his social media in the early hours of December, right before he carried out the attack. It seems they were saying that it was, within in just a few hours, he was also placing those IEDs himself, those 2 IEDs that they believe were functional and that were neutralized by law enforcement. Just a reminder, they had the FBI, bomb squad, ATF, HSI, all on the scene at that horrific attack on Bourbon Street. But the profile of Mr. Jabbar, the attacker, is now coming together. We've dug in, our confirmed team, our own Rona Tarrant. She looked into his background and went through the divorce records, and so we've learned that he actually had been, up until recently, earning a pretty good salary. He reported $125,000 a year annually, but that he was in debt of about $40,000. This was back in 2022. He was explaining in filings to his ex-wife's lawyer that he couldn't make payments. So he was having financial struggles despite holding down a job, but it appears that in recent months and years, his life began to spiral downward. The FBI also said at the presser that he said in one of the videos that he posted right before the attack that he joined ISIS before this summer. So they are still firm in their analysis that his attack was inspired by ISIS. Of course, we can't forget that ISIS flag that was attached to the back of the truck when he was attacking. Also, authorities are still asking the public for help, for tips. They are relying on people to come forward and explain what they saw, particularly on Bourbon Street. They want to know a little bit more about how he was able to place those IEDs and carry out the attack without being stopped. Liz?
And Anna, I want to go back to that moment in the press conference when they talked about the videos the attacker posted on social media, that he was inspired by ISIS. Let's listen to that real quick.
And he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament. FBI and ATF. We have a couple different scenes at the location.
Yeah, a couple questions to come out of those statements on those videos posted on Facebook. The big question right now is, how did the suspect become connected to ISIS? And then later on, possibly in the coming days, is if Facebook knew about these videos, did they alert law enforcement? But let's talk about first how the suspect possibly got connected to ISIS in the first place.
It's a great question, and it appears that investigators are still trying to pin that down. They have obtained 3 cell phones, 2 laptops. They're scouring his social media. They're presenting the information that they have buttoned up, these 5 videos, but they're looking to see who he was communicating with online. Was there somebody who was directing him to take action, or was this just a lone wolf who was inspired by the idea of ISIS and sort of this war on the West, and a war that he described in his video, according to the FBI, as a war between the believers and the disbelievers. Of course, investigators are going through all of his associates. Who was he spending time with? Who might have inspired him to carry out such an attack? But at this point, we don't have anything definitive that links him to a member of ISIS or other terror organization who was giving him any direction. Liz?
And Anna, authorities were also very careful to say that there is no known link between the attack in New Orleans and the Vegas Cybertruck explosion that happened just a few hours after the New Orleans attack. But there are some similarities to them, notably that both attackers were in the military at some point, and then also they used the same car rental company to get both of these different trucks. What can you tell us about the investigation into the Cybertruck explosion in Vegas?
Well, immediately after that explosion, investigators started to look into that bizarre and mysterious explosion, which involved fireworks and gasoline in the trunk of that Tesla Cybertruck, and they're still working. The Army hasn't even released the driver's name, although our team has spoken to his family members who are still, at this hour, still waiting for confirmation from federal authorities. The FBI did go to his home in Colorado Springs. They're doing the same sweep of electronic devices that they did on Jabbar. As you noted, there are no known connections, but it is interesting that they both used Turo, which is an app kind of like almost like Airbnb, but for cars, where you can rent a car from another person. And they were both driving electric vehicles. Investigators were looking into whether there was some kind of coordination. They have not found any, according to that latest presser. We've asked Turo as well, did both men request electric vehicles, and in particular a Tesla? So that's definitely a line of questioning. At this point, it appears to be a very bizarre coincidence that both incidents occurred within hours of each other, both using electric vehicles. Both men were in the military and served overseas in Afghanistan. There was some overlap. Both men also had spent time in North Carolina. So investigators have been looking at all of this and determined at this point they have no evidence of a link between the two men or the two incidents. Liz?
All right. Anna Schechter, the senior coordinating producer for the CBS News Crime and Safety Unit. Thanks so much, Anna. All right, let's go now to CBS News national reporter Katie Weiss. Katie, the FBI had a lot to say about the timeline between when the suspect left Houston and then the deadly attack where you are in New Orleans. What else do they have to say?
Well, you're right. They unpacked a lot of new details for us this morning that we've been waiting for throughout the last 24 hours since this terrible tragedy took place here. I'm actually standing on Canal Street, right where the attack first began. The driver drove right through, right down Bourbon Street there where you see the Walgreens sign. So it has been closed. The French Quarter has been closed ever since that took place. And now we're learning that may be changing very soon. We're also learning a little bit more about the two bomb devices or IEDs that were discovered in the French Quarter. We're learning that FBI bomb technicians were able to recover two of those IEDs in coolers. Apparently, the suspect had placed those IEDs in coolers in areas of the French Quarter, one at the area of Bourbon and Orleans Street, and then at another intersection a couple blocks away. And he placed those there before he carried out the attack. So that's some interesting new information as well. We are also told that those two devices were the only two functioning devices that were discovered. Investigators combed through hundreds of hours of videos to try to confirm and make sure that there was no other existing threat here in the French Quarter. And it sounds like at this point, investigators are very confident that the French Quarter and New Orleans is a safe place to be.
Yeah, they said they're going to reopen Bourbon Street ahead of the Sugar Bowl in just a couple of hours from now. All right, CBS News national reporter Katie Weiss. Thanks so much, Katie, for that reporting. Meanwhile, authorities are uncovering more about the New Orleans attacker and the man who rented the cyber truck that exploded outside the Trump Hotel in Vegas. One of the big similarities is that the men both served in Afghanistan, and it was around the same time. Let's go now to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata for more on this. Charlie, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with the New Orleans attacker. What can you tell us about his military history?
Right. So U.S. Army officials confirmed to us today that Jabbar, the suspect, was a U.S. Army veteran. He also served with the U.S. Army Reserves. But we originally contacted a Navy spokesman who told us he had originally enlisted back in the Navy in 2004, but he was discharged from their delayed entry program just 1 month later. So he then served in the U.S. Army from 2007 to 2015 as a human resources specialist and an IT specialist. As you said, he was deployed to Afghanistan, and that was from February 2009 to January 2010. Now, after he finished military duty, he served in the reserves once again in information technology from 2015 until 2020. He ended with the rank of staff sergeant.
And one of the key things that sort of is linking the attacker in New Orleans to the cyber truck attack is that they do have this military history, although authorities are saying right now there is no link between these two attacks. What can you tell us about the individual who rented out the cyber truck? What about their military service?
Yeah, like as you're mentioning and as we're speaking about it now, the reason you come to me at the Pentagon, there's a link by virtue of the fact that they both served in the U.S. military, right? Mm-hmm. So they are looking into that. The FBI is looking into it. As of now, they haven't really seen it. They kind of served at Fort Bragg. They served in Afghanistan. We can't be entirely sure whether there was an overlap, essentially whether they knew each other. But going back to the Tesla truck incident, this is reading from the Army statement, and I want to make sure I get it correct. So the person who suspected of renting the truck was an active duty service member identified as Master Sergeant Matthew Allen Livelsberger. He had 19 years service history, including Special Forces Command. So he would have had the kind of expertise in bomb making without speculating too far there. According to the Army statement, he enlisted in 2006. He was active duty till 2011. Then he joined the National Guard 2012, then Army Reserve again. And he was, or is, an Army Special Operations soldier. So it goes on. And I have to quote this statement because we can't confirm this ourselves. U.S. Army Special Operations Command can confirm. He was assigned to command and he was on leave, and this, according to the statement, at the time of his death. Okay, but despite that statement, CBS News can't confirm that the person inside that vehicle is the same person who rented that vehicle. So we're going to hold back on that. But that's according to the U.S. Army statement.
Right. Still a lot of information has to be confirmed. A lot of things are fluid, as the FBI said in that press conference just a few moments ago. But, quick question for you, Charlie, before you go. They talked about all these different agencies that are working on the investigation into both of these incidents in New Orleans and Las Vegas. Is the military going to play a part in some of this investigation more than just giving information on these two individuals' service?
Yeah, absolutely. See, whenever anything happens that involves a active or former service member, they have their own investigation department here. They look into it. So it's not just the service record. That's the first thing we got. And by the way, that is still patchy. We don't have the exact dates of both these individuals, for instance, when it comes to Afghanistan. But they'll be working very closely with the FBI because they'll be looking into not just who is responsible for the attacks in New Orleans or in Las Vegas, but what was behind it? What was their motivation? In the case of the New Orleans, when were these ideas put into his head? Because if it was during his military service in Afghanistan, or he was somehow conditioned by something that he had experienced, of course that becomes a U.S. military concern. So they'll be looking into the background, speaking to the other soldiers and service members, men and women who served beside them, to try to piece together what exactly motivated these individuals to do what they did.
All right, Charlie D'Agata live for us at the Pentagon. Thanks so much for that information. Okay, so a little bit more